Let's come to Nigeria now. One of the biggest stories today is that the 2023 budget has been presented by the President Muhammadu Buhari. It stands at 20.15 trillion naira. Even before now, when the proposal was at about 19 trillion naira, we saw that the deficit was more than 11 trillion naira, hinting at another set of borrowing. So now we want to drill down on this and see some of the possible ways of funding this, and we have joining us for that conversation Mr. Ayodeji Ebo, the Managing Director of Optimus by Afrinvest, joining us for that conversation. Good afternoon, Mr. Ebo. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon, and thanks for having me.
I wonder if you followed the presentation by the president, and what are your initial thoughts on you know, the presentation and the numbers that came out of that presentation?
Okay, thanks. And based on the text that was read, we've not seen the main document, and the budget has been called a budget of consolidation and transition. We know there's a new government taking over from next year, and the budget size about 19.78 trillion, which is massive. That's almost about 15% above the 2022 approved budget. Beyond that, part of what stood out was the 3.6 trillion naira budget for subsidy. And when you compare that, you would compare that to about 3.9 trillion naira that is being budgeted for capital expenditure. You would see that just about 19%. The amount budgeted for capital expenditure is lower than what was even budgeted last year, which shows that we shouldn't expect much impact from that, because the capital expenditure element is also a major part that benefits a larger part of the populace. Beyond that, when you look at the deficit, the budget deficit has also jumped up from this year's approved deficit from about 6 trillion to about 10 trillion. The new borrowings have been estimated about 8 trillion. So that's also very massive. And what would be coming to the mind is how do we fund? How do we get 8 trillion? And this is just budgeted. It means that when you look at it based on past revenue, we're projecting that based on this year, if you analyze based on budget performance, government will make about 5 trillion. And based on the projected revenue, about 9 trillion. So you would try to see that deficit would also cross about 10 trillion, which is also a major concern.
Mr. Ebo, so obviously I think you still have that proposed budget that the president had even before today, because at today's presentation it was reversed from 19 trillion to 20.5 trillion. But let's look at some of those details, and one of it is like oil benchmark has been placed at $70 a barrel. Daily oil production, I think that's what really catches attention, has been placed at 1.69 million. Meanwhile, at this moment, our quota is about 1.8 million. But as at August, we're not even able to meet up with 1 million barrels a day. So it now begs the question, is this our reality, this 1.69 million barrels a day? If our revenue or our budget is based on the revenue from oil, we are not able to meet 1 million barrel, and yet the budget is proposing 1.69. What's the reality in all of that?
Yeah, so that's why, like I mentioned earlier, that the projection would be above the 10 trillion being projected as the budget deficit. Because we also look at the reality, $73 per barrel oil benchmark, and our production is still far from where it is. So it's really a major call for concern, and something that I think is also good to notice that budget deficit also increased to about, budget servicing increased to about 6.3 trillion. So what we'll typically see from the 4 trillion that was projected in 2022 is that the efficiency of the budget will continue to reduce as we continue to borrow more, because most of the actual funding that we would get or actual revenue would be trailing the amounts to use to service debt, which is also a major concern. So I agree with you. It's not, when you look at the numbers, it's not realistic.
It will be interesting also to look at the exchange rates, which has been placed at 435 naira for a dollar, and we know the reality at this time. But I mean, it's time for a break now, Mr. Ebo, and I know we might even reach out to you subsequently on Business Morning to have this conversation. But thank you for answering us at such short notice, joining us on the program after that budget presentation.